Okay, guys, we are now going to touch base with our 14th president, Franklin Pierce, who's the son of a one-time governor of New Hampshire, entered politics at a young age. He served as Speaker of the state legislature before winning election to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1833. After 2 terms in the House of Representatives and 1 in the Senate, Pierce returned to practicing law, only to emerge in 1852 as the Democratic presidential candidate. During Pierce's administration from 1853 to 1857, settlement was encouraged in the northwest region of the country, even as sectional tensions increased over the issue of slavery and its extension into new territories. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, which Pierce signed in 1854, enraged anti-slavery Northerners and brought about the emergence of the new Republican Party. Pierce's inability to handle the upheaval in Kansas led to repudiation by many Democrats who denied him the party's nomination in 1856. Born on November 23, 1804, in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce was the son of Benjamin Pierce, a hero of the American Revolution, who was twice elected governor of New Hampshire. The younger Pierce graduated from Bowdoin College in 1824 and began to study law. He was admitted to the bar in 1827. At the age of 24, he won election to the New Hampshire state legislature, and 2 years later he became its speaker. A member of the Democratic Party and a steadfast supporter of Andrew Jackson, Pierce began serving in Congress in 1833. In 1834, he married Jane Appleton, the daughter of a former Bowdoin president. Now, did you know? At the time he was elected president in 1852, 47-year-old Franklin Pierce became the youngest man in history to win the office. A steadfast supporter of President Andrew Jackson in 1830s, he was dubbed Young Hickory, in an allusion to Jackson's famous nickname, Old Hickory. During his 2 terms in the House of Representatives until 1837 and 1 term in the Senate, 1837 to 1842, the young and handsome Pierce became a popular figure in Washington, though he had little influence compared to other prominent Democrats. Friendly with many Southerners, Pierce was impatient with more radical ambitions from New England. Often in ill health, Jane was unhappy with life in Washington, and in 1842, Pierce gave up his Senate seat and returned to Concord, where he became the leader in the legal community. Franklin Pierce served as an officer in the Mexican War, but stayed largely out of the public life for the next decade. He did earn the respect of many in his party for keeping New Hampshire Democrats together behind Lewis Cass in the 1848 presidential election, despite the threat by the Free Soil Party, and for holding the state Democrats to the terms of controversial compromise of 1850 against challenges to its tough fugitive slave laws. Backed by New Englanders and Southern delegates, the lesser-known Pierce emerged as the dark horse presidential candidate in 1852. A Democratic convention after the three leading candidates, Cass, Stephen A. Douglas, and James Buchanan, deadlocked. The issue of slavery loomed large over the year, and the Democratic platform included a pledge of complete support for the Compromise of 1850. The opposition Whig Party was more divided around the compromise, and Southerners hated the Whig Party or Whig candidate, General Winfield Scott, which helped Pierce win a narrow victory. Scott's defeat marked the last group for the Whigs, and the fractured party would soon dissolve. 2 months before he took office, Pierce and his family were in a train wreck on the way from Boston to Concord. Though Pierce and his wife were barely injured, their 11-year-old son, Benny, was killed. He was the third of their sons to die before reaching adulthood, and Pierce's wife, Jane, never fully recovered from the loss. Somber and pious, she had opposed to her husband's candidacy and would serve few of her social duties in the White House. When Franklin Pierce took office, the nation was enjoying an era of great economic prosperity and relative tranquility. For the time being, at least, the Compromise of 1850 seemed to have resolved the various sectional conflicts, primarily over slavery, that had divided the country. I fervently hope that the slavery question is at rest, Pierce said in his inaugural address. His proposal that the nation should expand its borders further immediately aroused the anger of many Northerners who felt the president was pandering to those seeking to expand slavery. These suspicions increased after Pierce pressed Great Britain to give up interest in Central America and tried to persuade Spain to sell Cuba to the United States. In late 1853, at the urge of the Secretary of War, Jefferson Davis, Pierce authorized the U.S. Minister to Mexico, James Gadsden, to negotiate the purchase of a territory seen as vital for a proposed rail line that would link the South with the Pacific coast. After Spanish authorities in Havana seized the U.S. vessel Black Warrior in February of 1854, the Pierce administration and ministers from Spain, France, and Britain concluded the Secret of Ostend Manifesto, which stated that if the United States determined that Spain's possession of Cuba was a security threat, it was justified in taking the island by force. The manifesto became public that fall, inspiring protest from the emerging Republicans, and another foreign policy development that year. Commodore Matthew C. Perry led the negotiation of a treaty that opened trade with Japan after years of Dutch monopoly. The great tension of Franklin Pierce's presidency and ultimately his downfall came to be attributed to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, proposed by Senator Stephen Douglas in early 1854. The bill formally organized Kansas and Nebraska into territories, opening them to settlement and railroad buildings. It also repealed the ban on slavery in Kansas, mandated by the Missouri Compromise in 1820, declaring that the citizens of each territory, not Congress, had the right to choose whether the territory would allow slavery, a concept Douglas called popular sovereignty. Pierce's support helped push the Kansas-Nebraska Act through Congress, while shared opposition to the bill led a coalition including anti-slavery Democrats, Free Soilers, and former Whigs to form the new Republican Party. Kansas soon became a battleground for sectional tension, and thousands of so-called border ruffians streamed in from Missouri to elect a pro-slavery legislature in March of 1855, making a mockery of popular sovereignty. When anti-slavery settlers in Kansas formed a rival government and sought administration to the Union as a free state, violence broke out between these free staters and their pro-slavery opponents. While Pierce resigned, sending federal troops to Kansas, tension reached new heights in Washington, with South Carolina Representative Preston Brooks assaulting Senator Charles Sumner, an abolitionist, on the state floor in May of 1856 for his ineptitude in handling the bleeding Kansas situation. Pierce was denied the Democratic presidential nominee in 1856 in favor of James Buchanan. In the end, Franklin Pierce's belief in the limited role of the federal government, combined with his accommodation of and submission to powerful pro-slavery interests within the Democratic Party, had made him largely ineffective as a leader. By the time he left office, the nation had moved closer to a civil war, and the situation would only grow worse under Buchanan, another Northerner with Southern sympathies. During the Civil War from 1861 to 1865, Pierce accused Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans of reckless conduct and denounced Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation that was done in 1863, but that will be I'll talk more about that when I get to Abraham Lincoln. At a Democratic rally on July 4th, 1863, he condemned the war as fearful, fruitless, and fatal, immediately losing face when news came of the historic Union victory at Gettysburg. His wife died later in 1863, and Pierce stayed largely out of the public eye from then on. He died in Concord in 1869. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.